With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast with Michael Thompson. I'm here with some experts, actually, today. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
We've had several weeks in September where we were on mission at a couple different weekends, these environments that we love to create. We had the Deepening Weekend for women. We had the Heart of a Warrior Encounter for men. We were out west, actually Western North Carolina, for the women at a Young Life camp, Windy Gap. That was awesome.
Yeah, first time, maybe last time we ever do them back to back like that too, because I think the mission following those two took us about a week to be able to walk.
My horse has not recovered.
Pretty good.
Neither has Sherry's horse.
Yeah, there's still some more vitamin B12 in my future and things like that. So
Jethro, my black stallion, is not coming out of the barn for a while. It was beautiful though.
My gosh.
And the Heart of a Warrior Weekend. Let me introduce who's in the studio with SJ and I. We have our experts on love, our beautiful brides, Robin Thompson and Sherry Jennings. And even with the break that we had to take from podcasting and sharing, exploring more, the real reason why we do these environments, create these retreats and conference places for people to get away with God, is for this series that we're talking about.
Ingredients of love.
To be loved.
Right.
What it looked like to get away with God for a few days and let Him share some things, tell you some things. What do you hear from the impact sheets near the end of the conference, right? The men and the women get to share a little bit about kind of a journal entry or a few paragraphs they share with us and turn them in. What happened? What did God do? What's the grand thread that's woven through so many of those impact sheets?
Well, the ones that I read and from the women that I have met with, hearing them share their stories, the common thread is the times that they had alone with God, taking their questions that we gave them to take to God, was huge for them, a first time for many. And the stories that I heard were of their encountering the nearness of God and seeing God come for them in very specific, intentional ways, which was awesome. I had tears in my eyes every story that I read and every story that I've heard face to face from the women. Beautiful stories where they're experiencing God's coming for them.
Absolutely.
Which it is Him loving them. They feel seen, they feel known, they feel intentionally pursued, and all that is within the context of love and being loved.
Yeah.
So many of them hearing for the first time that they have a significant role, that they have a glory about them that is needed, wanted, desired, longed for in this kingdom. Without them, with them playing small, they're missed, and they're so, so needed.
Yeah, explain that a little bit further. What do you mean by playing small?
By moving about in our small stories and focusing on the to-dos rather than the who I am.
Right.
And walking with Jesus for the glory of their life, recovering their hearts.
Yeah.
Going back to awakening to who they were created to be, their truest selves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Shutting down, dismantling, destroying the false self that's been operating and running their lives. There's a freedom that they had no idea, but longed for, but had no idea they were missing.
You delivered the false self-talk at the weekend.
Which was incredible.
Which you've done before, and it just keeps getting better. And you give a whole list during the weekend of how women might see themselves and play that smaller role, right? The soccer mom, the what?
Oh, the one who takes care of everything.
Right. The one who gets taken advantage of. I mean, you had this whole amazing list. I think it was really impactful.
Yeah.
It was. And the reason that we talk about the false self, because it's in the way. Of what?
Love.
Of being loved.
Of loving.
Being loved for who I am, not what I do. And so, I mean, I just want to go on record, friends and allies, this is what we're about all the time. Not an indictment on Christianity at large or the church at large, but these are church-going folks who come to these weekends for the most part, and they're really trading up from service to belovedness, being loved. And this stuff that you're talking about, the false self, we do that session because there's a method, right, to our madness, because this character is in the way. It's not you, but it's in the way.
Well, and I love that you said moving from, because I think that's what I heard a lot of too that weekend, is moving from servant and slave to beloved daughter, and living from that place of knowing that I'm a beloved daughter, and knowing that my son is a beloved son, and my husband, he's a beloved son. So how we move from that place versus the place of a servant or a sinner or feeling worthless changes everything.
And I just want to give our listeners some more detail, right, Rob? Because this is not an educational weekend. Though there is education taking place, it's experiential.
Right.
It's not memorized list or Sherry's telling you you're loved.
No.
It is, like you said, moving away from a session and into time alone with God and exploring the things that could be in the way, the lies that we could have believed along the way, and everybody has them. And how is that in the way of being loved by God? And so, yes, when we see these impact sheets, we are reading literal feedback from people that are saying, he validated me. He told me what I was worth. I heard him say that I belong to him and he belonged. I mean,
he accepted me
encounters.
even with all my junk.
Yes, these are the ingredients of love that we're talking about.
That's right.
I just want to bring that, right in front of everybody, that this is the magic ingredient. This is the special pill. This is the very thing that we were made for.
And I think one of the things that makes those times alone with God more accessible maybe for the women is they've just come from sessions hearing our team, the guide team, share not just, like you said, educationally teach at them or instruct them, but we tell stories of what it looks like in our life. We tell stories of how God comes for us, what's in the way of that. So they then get to go ask God, would you do that for me? Would you tell me who I am to you? Because they've just heard the similar stories.
Right. And we invite them into that conversation with Jesus and the Holy Spirit and Father God.
Yeah. And the men, any different at
No,
Heart of Warrior
not really.
Quest?
I mean, I was just thinking, as Robin, as you were sharing about how the speaker team, the guide team, shares their stories and kind of leads the men into these times alone with God. I just was brought back to the first weekend I came to 10, maybe 11 years ago. I think it was 2008. And just remembering like, wow, this is different. Now, I hadn't been a Christian long, but I was part of a church and had been to some air quote retreats, right? Where you go and you get more education and you get told what you should be doing rather than kind of who you are.
And how you're falling
And
short.
the difference, too, was the speaker team. I remember the guide team, Michael and some of the other guys, sharing stories of how they had been struggling in these areas, too, and how God had come for their hearts. And so I remember I was brought back as you were describing that to that moment of, well, maybe this is true for me. Maybe I can get more free. Maybe I can be more authentic.
Yeah. Maybe God would speak to me. It's one thing to read a letter. It's quite a different thing to experience the one who wrote it. And I love the scriptures. I mean, we're going to talk about that today.
Right.
And through every podcast, I hope, as it invites us and points to invitations and encounters and experiences and opportunities to really begin, if not yet, to begin to recognize the voice of God, the presence of God. How does he speak? The most loving being in the universe.
Yeah.
And he's mute? That doesn't make any sense to me. But that's a kind of Christianity that unfortunately was part of my life, part of my story. If you wanted some God, you kind of went to church. And you read the Bible during the week. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. Listeners, that's not a bad thing.
That's not all that love entails.
This is my soapbox, man. This is Zoe's stage. This is what we get passionate about. Not only do we pound the table, we ride hard
Yeah.
for these kind of events and these kind of opportunities. And we want to experience it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We want to experience it for ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm getting to work on this new book, King Me, and I am more in love with Jesus than I was a week ago. He is killing me with how awesome he is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some passages and some stories, but it's just a collaborative thing. I'm getting to write with him. I know that not every thought's my own, and I want as many of my thoughts and his thoughts to be in dance together, in harmony together, in step together. And it's fun. It's so fun, so good. And then later on in the afternoon, the other day when I was writing, I'm in a deliverance appointment, literally stepping into what's going to be confronting the enemy in another man's life and saying, all right, no more. You can't do this. You're not allowed. Taking authority, bringing the strength that God's given us in the kingdom. But all of it is love.
Yeah. You were loving that guy. You were loving Jesus. You were loving the other guy that was in the room. And yeah, you could say you were educating them. You were showing them how to do it, maybe a little bit. But I think it was mostly the demonstration of this is one of the ways that Jesus loves us, is that he equips us for battle.
Yeah. I want to go back to the ladies because I think this is what happens from some of the weekends just recently. Were you validated at all by the women?
Yes.
What did they? Yeah.
Gosh, I've been on the phone like Robin with some of the different women from after the weekend and lunch yesterday. Just hearing the woman say, oh my stars, what you do is so significant. It's so important. Yeah. I needed to hear that. What every woman said, I needed to hear all of the stories. I needed and was so thankful for that time alone with God. Don't stop.
Right.
What you're doing is so significant.
So validation, right? Anybody that you've met with since the weekend?
Yeah, like Sherry, times with women, hearing their stories, same thing, saying thank you for doing what you do, your team and the stories and how vulnerable we are and authentic. We just share our lives and share our stories in the context of friendship. And that means so much to them. I think they feel like it is accessible for them because they know how real and crazy we are and flawed. And if it is true for us, it could be true for them as well.
Yeah. And not all the women, just like not all the men who come to the weekends, I mean, they're not here locally within our radius. I mean, these are people coming from all over the country and all over the world to these weekends. But even after the weekend, how many more women are coming on your small group night now, the one that you opened up?
Yeah, a lot.
Full
12, 14 more women. I mean, so they're hungry.
18, 20.
They're hungry and thirsty. When you start tasting and experiencing this kind of love from God, you want more. Yeah. Even though we're promised we'll thirst no more, it's really interesting. But there's a hunger and thirst for goodness and for righteousness and for training and for more healing. It's all in this conversation, right? It's all a part of this being love. What is love? All right. And that's what we were doing before we took our break and went on these missions.
Yeah.
But we were on mission for love and about love. And I want to connect one more thing for our listeners because I think it's something that we want to do even in our lives. Who was really validating you?
The Father.
Right.
Father God.
The Father gives packages to his friends to give those packages to his friends, to his sons and daughters. It's an amazing delivery system. But how many of us miss that the validation actually is coming from the Father?
Oh, yeah. Well, God is love. We're told that. And so anytime we experience love, we're experiencing him and his love.
Oh, gosh. And all I can think of is I was talking to SJ before we started, and we were talking about validation. And I'm thinking, Scott, remind me of stories of this. And he just said, well, Sherry, in the last week, who have you spoken to? And I shared some. I said, but it's so hard to remember. Because that stuff slides off. Yeah. The validation slides off so quickly. Yeah. If I don't remember, oh my gosh, this is God speaking to me through this woman.
Right. I remember, Sherry, there was a time in my life, even in ministry in my 30s, where I would encourage somebody, but there was some strings attached. I would encourage them so that I could get encouraged. You know, I would do things for people and, you know, you don't want to keep a ledger, but it's very hard not to do when you're living in a smaller story. Yeah. When it's a doing thing. I do for you and you'll do for me, you know, and that's not freedom. And yet that's where I think some of the world, the enemy, the false self, all of that kind of can come together to hijack this thing and have us living small, having us live unaware that the encouragement that I'm being given I may want to attach to that person encouraging me. Why? I'll take more of that, please.
Oh, yeah.
But if you understand who's encouraging you through that person, it's a bigger story. It's a bigger matter altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to move towards the one who really is encouraging you through those people. And now the Father's close.
I think that's a main part of the weekend. You've heard us talk about, and say the phrase, what's in the way? For so many people, there's something in the way of them being able to receive the love of God. And so they seek it in other places.
Mm-hmm.
I think for every person,
because we're
that's
made
probably
for
true.
it. Absolutely. We're made for it.
We're seeking it
Absolutely.
through, whatever it is. You could list them all. I mean, there's a million of them. But to be free from that and to be more and more free from that is the goal.
At least to bring those things down to a secondary space.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with getting validation at work or through work.
Oh, sure.
But if it's your primary source, you are going to break down on the side of the road, in your cubicle,
that
in your
person's
corner
gonna
office.
let you down, and we've
won't.
all experienced that too, where we were really upset with someone, because they let us down somehow, didn't affirm us, didn't give us the encouragement we wanted, the validation, whatever it might be. And then really what we have to look at is, well, is that the person that's really designed to love me the way I'm expecting to be loved?
Right. Am I putting weight on Robin as my spouse to come through for me in that way?
Yeah.
And we know that the antithesis of some of these love things are hatred, betrayal. I mean, they're all the other side of a color of the beautiful and the good of love. I mean, you look at what a hate crime is.
Yeah.
It is the absence of love.
Right.
You look at what jealousy is. It's an absence of love, wanting something somebody else has. I mean, the world revolves around this subject. I mean, I don't think we grasp the beauty, the weight, the significance of it. And that's why I love why we're talking about it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's why, like you said, Rob, if God is love, what is loveless, it's a life without him.
Well, let's take a break. And then maybe when we come back.
I got an idea.
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Okay. That's a great idea.
You're the only one watching the time.
I have.
That was 20 minutes.
So,
boom.
yeah, but let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about this idea. So Satan and his emissaries, they don't create anything. All they do is pervert and twist and hijack God and his design.
Okay.
So maybe we talk about...
I got a big opening question for that.
Okay, that's
right
great.
there.
When we come back from the break.
All right, be right back. Hey, friends and allies of Exploring More podcast. We wanted to bring some attention to some of our free downloadable resources on our Zoe website. First, there's a 14-day devotional on being fathered by God. This is the same devotional that you can get a PDF download on our website. You also can find on the YouVersion Bible app. Also, the 14-day devotional on the Heart of a Warrior, another great resource to walk through with men or in your own time alone with God. The last free download that we want to draw attention to is the Biblical Theology of the Heart. Is the redeemed heart good? Is this piece of equipment that is so vital to living in the kingdom, is it good or is it not? Download the Biblical Theology of the Heart to find out more. You can find these 3 resources and many other free downloads and free audio files on our website at www.zoweh.org. All right, welcome back. Exploring More podcast. Friends and allies, we are talking about the ingredients of love. We've got Sherry Jennings and Robin Thompson in the studio with us, in the house.
In his house.
With SJ and I to
Hers house.
Yeah, to continue to explore this. It's vast, it's wonderful, and it's personal. It gets really personal. We're made for this as image bearers, and so we're most alive when we're being loved. And before the break, SJ had mentioned how the enemy hijacks, how the enemy is absolutely about thwarting. If you want to know what the enemy of our hearts and our souls is up to, it's thwarting this. Mm-hmm. It's depriving you of this, keeping you from experiencing the love of God because they know. So you brought that up, and I want to transition to how there's the blatant, obvious ways that wars and holocausts, and those deserve their conversations 100%. But I want to talk about this within the faith journey just a little bit, how the enemy hijacks it within Christianity. And I want to read a popular quote that I think is for this conversation. I won't read who it's from. Listeners can Google that if they want to and find out. But there could be several prominent Christian leaders that teach this and think this, believe this. So here it is. Love is not only something you feel, it is something you do. Which part of that sentence did you hear?
Can you read it again?
Yeah, love is not only something you feel, it's something you do. We came out of a ministry experience for years when there was a really popular book
Faith is not a feeling.
about faith not being a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Love is not
Yeah,
only
love is a
something you
decision.
feel, it is something you do.
You look like you were choking up a chicken bone just saying the title of that book. Faith is not a feeling.
Oh,
I
and
don't even
I'm
like
sure
saying it.
The confession is, I'm sure I taught it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm sure I
know I did.
promoted it. You know, this is the covert op.
Mm-hmm.
What's the enemy doing when quotes like that circulate through faith and
Yeah.
Christianity?
Christian circles, and people are like,
What did
oh,
you hear?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
What?
Are you sure?
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds void of experience and heart and not just feelings that necessarily that come and go, but yet it is a feeling. It is an experience. It's felt and experienced in the heart.
And I think it's missing the fullness of what
Mm.
love is. I
That's
mean,
a
if
good
God
word.
is love, I mean, he's so much more than emotion and feeling and doing. And we had taught it that don't let your emotions lead you. It is so much more. It's so much bigger than just a feeling or a doing. I don't even know that I have words for it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
I
Well,
think
let me
It's
say
what we
this
were
one more
created
time.
for, and it's the story
Yeah.
we're living in.
Right.
So let me say this again. Not only that, Sherry, right? Love is not only something we feel. What does that do in that phrase?
It's trying to diminish the
Diminish.
feeling.
It diminishes
Mhm. The
it diminishes the experience.
mhm,
and
mhm.
somehow
the heart experience.
brings
Yeah.
Mhm.
brings to the forefront that this is somehow better,
Right, and
And
turning
it-
it into a formula.
and it
Mhm.
separates them
Hmm.
rather than I think what we would believe as a team that no, this is a both and.
And there's so much more.
And not only that, Michael,
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
much more. Touche.
Yeah. We're going to do probably next week, listeners, we're going to talk about the ingredient of love, belonging.
Yeah.
And the scripture that came to mind for that was John 15:15. No longer do I call you servant, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. So I bring that up now, and I'll bring it up again in the next episode when we talk about belonging. But I bring it up now in that, someone that's a friend to you, a friend that loves you, is not a friend that is basing their relationship on what you do.
No, you've gotten past that.
Yeah.
That's kind of early on. That's kind of
Yeah.
often at the beginning of a relationship.
Yeah. Much like the beginning of your relationship with Jesus.
Mhm.
It's a lot like
what
that.
he's done for you.
And what you're doing,
You should be.
you're going to
more
stop sinning. I almost said singing.
Yeah.
You're going to stop. Some of us should probably, but no. But
Right.
really, it's a to-do list. This is what Christianity
Yeah.
in general, not all of it, every aspect, but in general has said, you've got a to-do list. And that's what they're trying to do with that quote too. They're trying to make love part of a to-do list.
And that there's a servitude, like you said, an obedience and a response that Jesus's death merits. The deserving thing starts to come into conversation that what you deserved was, well, that whole conversation
Eternal
is
death
really
and
void of
damnation.
it's really void of love and romance.
Yeah.
And I get it, Paul. I get it that there's a reality to sin and separation, but that's exactly what Jesus was about. I don't want you to be separated from me. It's Hebrews, for the joy set before him, he endures the cross. I mean, there's far more operational than just his to-do list, even though he was missionally, but it was motivated by his love for you. He leaves the right hand of the Father for love. And yes, he's about the Father's business. He's about the mission. He's about the faithfulness to what the cross, resurrection are going to accomplish for us. But without love,
It's a clanging gong.
it's a wonderful act of service,
right?
but
It's just, you're just
You
making noise.
you can't separate these things in the kingdom. The enemy wants it to be done.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
That's to answer your question
Yes,
before the break.
absolutely.
How does
And what's the enemy up
hijack
to?
this?
Yeah, diminishment. He's trying to diminish love. He's trying to make it less than it is. He's trying to turn it into a to-do list.
Absent of feeling, absent of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
absent of experiencing I mean, are you in love with a fact? You're married. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you in love with the person that you're married to?
Yeah. So follow-up question, is there a time when, in order to move towards the feeling and further explore it and further understand the love of God, is there a time that you should follow a to-do list? I mean, as a new Christian or someone that's exploring it, is it always a bad thing to say, okay, man, you're just embarking on this faith journey. You want to know who Jesus is. Here's what I would say to do. Is that the wrong thing to do that would lead them to love?
Depends on what you say to do.
Okay. Okay.
And,
what do you guys think?
And I don't like to think of it in terms of a list because it implies a to-do list, dutiful, whereas maybe there's an invitation to what might it look like to pursue some of these things. It's perspective, I guess, maybe.
No, that's good, though.
And I think that's what I love about our weekends and sort of the way that we live and move in this is it's not a weekend of do these 5 things and life will be great. It's the continual invitation. This is how it looks in my life. And here's the invitation for you to walk with Jesus in this, an awakening and awareness.
And then Rebecca is popping into my head because she said, and how far do you want to go with that?
Right.
Right. I mean,
Right.
it's,
because you don't know what you
There's
don't
always
know.
more.
yeah. Yeah.
So that awareness, that awakening, that invitation, that freedom
Yeah.
to experience this.
I mean, these ingredients that we're talking about, SJ, and the girls are involved now, and we'll get to in the next 2 sessions too. Validation feels like something. Worth, belonging, significance. I wish we would quit working so hard at alienating that idea rather than, go ahead and mix the sugar and the cream in there. The coffee's good that way.
Yeah. Right.
It changes the flavor, the taste, rather than obedience, which is not a bad marriage. I know Robin would be happy if I would just obey the code of marriage, but it's different, right? I'm making that. I was tongue in cheek. Thank you.
That sounds bad.
I'm glad you responded that way.
No, I wouldn't.
No, I
wants
wouldn't.
to be in a relationship where they're obeying.
It's Groundhog Day. Bill Murray, he's got the list. Okay, no Rocky Road.
Yeah.
Only French vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
She's like, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Gary's got a story about him having a list trying to remember the questions he tried to pursue Lee. We won't bust one of our one of our head coaches, but but to step into a relationship where, what's the sacred romance quote? Where you're being pursued for who you really are, to be known. Again, there's words within our faith journey like quiet time. That has been associated quite a bit with a ritual or a chore. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Read your Bibles, everybody. You ought to just read your Bibles. But when you know that you're getting up that morning and you're pulling away before the day comes, C.S. Lewis talks about one of the greatest challenges for any believer is to keep the wild animals at bay while you enter into the presence of God. But to enter into that presence, into the sanctuary, into a place where you've got questions or you want to hear things, you want to talk to him and you want him to talk to you, it sounds like an intimate relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a loving relationship.
Yeah. And if you've encountered an experience like our friends have at the weekends and like we, I think, do in as many mornings and as often as we can, we see this differently now than we used to. I'm not having to be obedient. I'm enjoying the faithfulness of our relationship. And it's a different thing.
Right. It becomes less about checking a box and more about, I so need this. I so need this every morning.
Yeah. I love when he shows me things and tells me things. And sometimes it's in worship music. Sometimes it's in podcasts I'm listening to. Sometimes it's just in quiet. I'm not doing anything but being with him. I'm not reading anything. I'm not listening to anything but him.
Right. And sometimes it sneaks up on you when you're running or walking through Duke Gardens or, you just don't know. Through a floral nursery.
Yeah.
Let's just spend the last of this session on, so where was one of the last kind of moments that you experienced and encountered God's love in your life?
Well, I got up to go running the other morning, speaking of that, and I usually use an app to keep the time so I know my pace and I know how long I've been running, and I like to know and be able to record and go back and analyze, which just sounds really geeky, but I enjoy knowing those things in the course of my run. And I kid you not, I got out there and I'm going, and a minute in, it tells me I've run a mile. And I'm like, I know I'm not that fast. So I rebooted it, and 3 minutes later, it tells me I've gone another mile. And I'm thinking, okay, something is up here. So it was very challenging, but I just turned the app off instead of trying again and realizing that I'm not going to have an accurate record of how long it took me to run/walk/move 4 miles. I instead saw the invitation from Jesus to just run when I felt like running, and stop and take pictures when I wanted to stop and take pictures. And there were horses out for the first time on this new route that I'm running that were beautiful, and it was foggy out, and it was stunning. I'm not sure if I ran more or walked more, because who knows how much time it really took. And then coming around the hill, the sun was a little higher than I'm accustomed to it being, because I'm usually out earlier. And it just fell on the fields and the sunflowers and the trees and the fog and the mist that's rising off the ground in a different way than it ever had before. And around the corner, and there are cows, and I'm talking to the cows. So I saw so much more in that freedom, and hearing him say to reboot, to start again, to just exhale and start moving again, start breathing again, start thinking and feeling and experiencing again. You don't have to go back to the start. You can do it from wherever you are.
And be open to what he
Yeah.
brings, what he
Yeah.
might bring to you in that place.
And all freedom to experience whatever he brings in that time.
That's
It
good.
was just really sweet and precious. And
Sounds like you got
That's
a
good.
real different
it.
focal point, one from your app and the phone and the analytics to chin up. I want to run with you,
yeah,
and I want you to run with me.
instead of holding both,
Don't worry about your time.
which is what I've been
Right,
doing.
don't,
Mhm.
Yeah,
yeah, that's really good.
it was sweet.
I love how he surprises us like that.
Yeah.
You couldn't necessarily have planned for that. But
Mm-mm. It was disrupting.
Mm.
At first, it was really disrupting. Do I go back and start the 4 miles over? I'm not doing that.
I want to be able to accurately post to social media how far I went today.
Problems of a one. Challenges of a one.
Yes,
Challenges.
I know not of those challenges.
yes. Yeah.
That's good, Sherry. I love that. For me, in the mornings, I love starting the morning with picturing myself climbing up and sitting with Jesus, climbing up onto the Father's lap, committing my time to him, with him, and wanting to receive all he has for me. And I ask him, Jesus, where do you want to go today? What do you want to show me today? What do you want to tell me today? So sometimes I'll just sit quietly, think, and keep open to listen to what he might bring. And then I'll start moving into some of the things that I do that I love in the mornings with him. Some worship music. Then I have some things that I read that I love, a C.S. Lewis daily reading and a Henry Nouwen daily reading and a book, Experiencing God's Presence. Thank you. And these different things that it's not a formula. I don't have to read all of them. But yet the other morning, there was this common thread, not in every single one of them. And I read a couple psalms, the words, your unfailing love. They were jumping off the page to me. And then in one of the worship songs, and then in several of the readings that day, I just kept hearing your unfailing love. And it was just so precious to my heart. It was clear to me that Jesus was really wanting me to know and experience the depth of his unfailing love. So that was recent. Just loving that when we're looking and seeking, he comes and speaks. And I love when he weaves things together like that. Like there are different ways that he comes and I connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
That's sweet.
How about you, SJ?
When we were out at the Heart of a Warrior West, I got to respond to one of the talks, and Tom was teaching about soaking prayer. So I was sharing a story, and it was kind of the theme of the weekend. There were holy ambushes going on, where I really wasn't expecting you to do that right there and there, God. That was kind of threw me off a little bit, but that's great. Thank you. So yeah, one of them was when I was on the stage just sharing a response, and I've just been kind of chewing through not only what he revealed to me, but why he would choose to do it right then in that moment. While I'm sharing a story, revelation comes out of nowhere, like a holy hand grenade thrown in to the foxhole there, and it just blew up. So I'm kind of wrestling with that right now, and honestly don't have any answers yet as to that timing. I could postulate and come up with a few, but I haven't heard anything from him yet. So I'm still waiting to hear that, what that's going to be.
Yeah, having it unfinished doesn't have to be an awkward or bad thing. It's just, It just is that.
Well, and I think what's
now.
interesting, Michael, is that, when there's an unanswered question and you really want the answer to it, if you need that motivation to spend time with him, then okay, I'm a strong believer that God will do what he needs to do to get your attention and your time.
Mm-hmm.
He'll arrange circumstances and drop in holy ambushes. So you're kind of like, what was that about?
Right.
Well,
yeah.
I want to give you the answer, but really what I want is you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. That's really good. We ask a question at all of our conferences. So if you've been, you know this. If you haven't, you will. But it's this question of, so how many moments is God in a day? And that's either bothering, disturbing, provoking, or it's an invitation to see more. And I think that if he's loving us, and part of that, would be a lane of healing. He wants to heal us from brokenness and wounding moments and the wounding messages and the lies that have, slithered their way into the garden of our hearts, as our friend Pat Benner would say. And so there's a love that heals. There's a love that trains. I don't want you to get hurt anymore. I'm going to show you how to defend yourself, how to guard your heart, because it's the wellspring of life, Proverbs 4:23. So it's a loving training.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some hard work sometimes, to see God pull from our hands gently. And I feel like, there's a lot of times if I pull back, he says, okay, we'll get this one next time.
Yeah.
When you're ready.
Yeah, and when you're ready, I'll show you what training you've been in. It makes me think of Mr. Miyagi, right?
Right.
You think you've been waxing the car? Oh, no.
No, we're learning karate.
That's right. We're learning karate.
We were on the back porch with some of the guys just the other day, and back to a loving training moment. Jim said something. You know the moment I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
So my friends heard me, and I even heard me. My reaction, it had a little more energy, not with a smile. I said, Jim, you don't know what you're talking about. And it was quiet for about 2 seconds. And then I, went on, I think a little more kindly, but okay, that's
it really wasn't hard to be more kind after that, I would say.
I'm not sure about Jim's face. And we have a rule here on Exploring More. You should always apologize to a person before talking about them over a podcast.
On the podcast, yeah.
So, Jim, I apologize again for,
we love you, Jim.
But the loving correction of God was, okay, bud, really?
What was that about? Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Right.
You know,
we've all worn that pair of shoes.
Versus penance and groveling and, or even worse, justification.
Right.
Like, Jim, this morning, it's just all connected is my point. How many moments is God in a day? Healing, training, inviting, or sometimes arm around. Yep, come here. We can talk about this if you want to.
Mm-hmm,
if you're
ready.
Willing, your will matters in this conversation. Mm-hmm. Your will matters in how you see God. We talk a lot about, there's some vantage points and views that we've all held that have kept us from experiencing God's love because we've believed some lies about him.
Sure.
And so to get those out of the way, get those off of us, get those out of us has been really, really part of our journeys, that God's far, or he's mad, or I'm not good enough. Things like that, listeners, are really, really in the way of experiencing the love of God.
And unlike Neo in The Matrix, you don't just take the red pill one time and your eyes are open. It's a constant, do you want to take the red one or the blue one here? Do you want to see? Do you want to see or you don't?
Yeah. How far, like you said with Rebecca on the video, how far do you want to go with this?
That's right.
There's a lot there. So
yeah,
we're going to continue this series and jump back into the ingredients, but this has been a great jumping back in and getting in the water. And thank you, Sherry and Robin, for being with us. Yeah. If you have any questions that you want to contact us with, you can email us.
Yeah. exploringmore@zoe.org. If you would, on whatever platform, or actually we just added another platform. We're on Stitcher now. I had a guy from out west say, how come you guys aren't on Stitcher? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So we went home and investigated. We're on there now.
We're now on 49 of the 459.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, those platforms are.
But we're on, whatever podcast platform you utilize. If you would leave us a rate and review, that would help us out immensely. We'd appreciate that. And for more about us, visit zoe.org. We've got resources and all kinds of stuff on our website for you. We'd love for you to check out. So until next week, we will see you later, podcast listeners. Thanks for listening.
Yep, take care. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.